Hi, and welcome to today's Career Exploration Series, focusing on law and government. We're glad to have you all with us today. My name is Dr. Jo Tuite, and I'm going to be your host. We have a very impressive panel with us today, and they're going to share information with you about their college pathways, their careers, emerging opportunities within the field, and so much more. The thing I love best about this program is that you get to ask questions of our experts. So get those questions ready. So let's go ahead and get started with some introductions. Laura, would you start us off, please?
Sure. So, hi, everyone. I'm delighted to be here today. My name is Laura Bennett. I graduated from the Academy in 2001. And a little bit about me, after I graduated high school from the Academy, I went to Indiana University for my undergrad degree. I majored in political science and gender studies, and I knew I wanted to go to law school. So that was one of the things I was thinking about when I was in undergrad. And I was able, thanks to some of the opportunities I had at the Academy, I was able to actually complete my undergrad degree in 3 years instead of 4. And I was really eager to get started with the next stage of my academic journey. So I graduated from IU in 2004, and then I entered law school at George Washington Law School in DC and graduated from that school in 2007. And I started my legal career at a large law firm based in Atlanta, but I was in the Washington, D.C. office and really enjoyed that job. I was there for 12 years. And some of the highlights for me were just the opportunities I had to work on a variety of different cases. My practice area was government investigations. So I would represent companies and individuals in congressional investigations, Department of Justice investigations, Securities and Exchange Commission investigations. And I would also help companies with internal investigations, with a particular emphasis on a law called the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. That law prohibits companies from paying bribes overseas. So sometimes I would be asked to help a company figure out if they actually had paid bribes. And that was really neat opportunity because I would be able to travel overseas a lot to interview witnesses, collect documents, respond to subpoenas issued by the government. So it was a really cool opportunity to travel the world. And eventually I moved on after 12 years to the Securities and Exchange Commission. So instead of representing companies that were under investigation by the SEC or DOJ, I then became part of the staff of the enforcement division at the SEC, investigating whether companies were violating the federal securities laws. So that's what I do now. I've been there for a little over 5 years and really enjoying my time there. I'll pass it along now to April. April, are you there?
I think we lost April for just a second. I know everybody's super busy and she may have needed to take a quick call. So we will jump back into introductions in just a moment. But before we move any further, let me go ahead and explain to everybody how you can ask questions of our panel today. So if you're here in the Zoom room, you can drop your questions in the chat box, either to everyone, or you can drop them to me privately and I'll present them to our panelists. And then if you're watching on one of our social media platforms, you can either drop those questions in the comments or you can email it to me at the address listed right next to my name on your screen. So those are the two ways that you can ask questions. And it looks like we have April back. April, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Jo. It's good to see and speak with all of you. My name is April Keaton. I am a 1993 graduate of the Indiana Academy. So my class was the second class to graduate from the Indiana Academy. After the Academy, I went to Kalamazoo College in Michigan, where I studied in economics and international studies, had several opportunities for experiential programs where I was able to travel to Tokyo, Japan and live for a year, and also did internships in Washington, D.C. After completing Kalamazoo, I worked for several years in a financial services firm, secured my MBA before going to law school. And while in law school, I also worked in law firms. So I worked in small, medium, and large law firms. I did several clerkships with state and federal government before moving into my practice, where I work as a government attorney, specifically a litigator with the Consumer Protection Division of the Indiana Attorney General's office. So I'm open to any questions that you want to ask me about my specific journey or any questions you have about the practice, and have a very productive morning.
Thank you so much. Just as a quick reminder for those here in the Zoom room, if you have any questions for our panelists, just drop those to everyone or to me privately in the chat box. And if you're watching this, excuse me, on one of our social media platforms, just drop those questions in the comments, or you can email them to me at the email address that you see on the screen next to my name. With that, I'm going to go ahead and present the first question as you all begin typing yours in. This question was pre-submitted from somebody that couldn't attend, so I'm anxious to get this answer for them. The question is, do all jobs in government require a law degree? And if not, what do you believe is the best degree to prepare for that particular field?
Well, I can kick it off talking specifically about federal opportunities in federal service. So I was born and raised in Indiana, went to the academy, and then eventually moved to DC for law school and wanted to stay. So since I've been working, I think it's a little over 17 years in the Washington, DC area, I've seen a little bit about what my friends and colleagues have done in terms of pursuing careers in federal government. And then I did that as well 5 years ago. So the answer to that question, in my opinion, is no, you don't have to have a law degree to pursue careers in federal government. I actually, thinking about my kids' futures, I would love if they joined the federal government even without pursuing law school, because the federal government, from my experience and in seeing colleagues and friends, it's, just a good place to work. It's the work is so meaningful, feeling like you're getting up every morning and making a difference in the lives of yourself and your fellow citizens. And so the challenge, though, is just getting your foot in the door. It is hard to get hired in the federal government. What I always encourage people to do is you can set up alerts on a site called USA Jobs. That's what the federal government uses to advertise opportunities. And there are specific programs. If you identify agencies as an undergrad, if you identify agencies of interest, you can do internships during your college summers. You can do like a semester in DC, even if you're not attending college in the DC area. And those are ways to get your foot in the door. And some agencies will have pathways programs where you can, express your interest in undergrad and then continue working and start full-time with the agency that you've already interned with. So just doing your homework and researching is crucial, and you can set alerts on USA Jobs for agencies of interest and getting a feel for, even now, like, what are the qualifications that they are looking for in entry-level employees, non-attorneys, and what are the things I can do in the meantime to build up my resume so that I can respond to these and have relevant skills and experiences that I can point to when I'm interested in applying. So you definitely don't need a law degree. There's plenty of opportunities in the government for non-lawyers to work their whole careers and have really successful, engaging opportunities throughout their time.
And I would agree. Just while Laura was speaking, I went to USA Jobs and typed in Indiana as a location. And presently there are over 1,000 jobs open on USA Jobs that appeared to be located in the state of Indiana. And the departments that they range from, everything, the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Interior, the Department of Labor, up to some military departments and the Department of Veterans Affairs. As most people know, government hits every aspect of a person's life. So just like law, it hits everything, but government hits everything as well. So government needs individuals who are scientists, especially if they work for the Department of Environmental Management, if they work for any kind of natural resource office. They need accountants, especially if you're doing any forensic accounting, like the Department of Commerce, or you're doing investigations. So if you have a desire to work in government, you don't feel like you have to pursue a particular path in law to do it. Anything that you like doing now, whether it's math or science, there's a space for you in government at all levels.
Hey, thank you so much. We have a little bit of a follow-up question to that one. And the question is, as a high school student, what's the best way for me to prepare for law school?
So I'm happy to start first. I think the best way to prepare for law school is to just, I don't know, there's so many different paths to pursuing a law degree. So if you are someone who is thinking about law school and you're still in high school, thinking about identifying colleges that might be somewhere where you can focus on developing skills that are helpful for being a lawyer. So the key, I think, for most lawyers is writing, just building, like working on your writing and challenging yourself to take hard classes, to push yourself to be, get a lot of feedback and maybe not get always an A, don't do the easy route in terms of writing in English classes. And so I think just challenging yourself to grow as a writer and your communication skills. So oral communication skills as well. Can you do activities and clubs that where you're putting yourself out there, public speaking opportunities? Those are some of the ways that you can best prepare yourself for law school. But I would also just do your homework, think about like, there are ways, one thing you can think about between college and law school is being a paralegal. So you could talk to people, do a lot, do your homework just in terms of getting to know what's it like to be a lawyer. Is law school right for me? What's it like to be a law student? Where do I want to practice? Where, for practice areas of interest, what geography should I be looking for in terms of those opportunities? And just doing your homework as early as possible, even in high school.
I agree with everything Laura just said about reading and writing and being very comfortable with those things. As a non-traditional law school student, in that I did not go straight from undergrad to law school, I did take the opportunity to actually work in legal environments to make sure that that was the path I wanted for me. But if you want to take the track of going from high school to undergrad to law school, there are organizations out there that do offer programs to give kids an introduction into it. For example, the Indiana Bar Foundation, which I'm a very active member of the State Bar Association, has a program called We the People, and it focuses on K through 12 students to expose them to appellate law. So kind of in a snapshot, what you get is you get a hypothetical case about some area of law that would be a kind of case that they would hear before the US Supreme Court. And you develop a team in your school and you come up with an argument. And you come up with an argument, both pro and con, for this particular question that you might be presented with, and you compete against other schools. In fact, we just completed a round of the We the People program, but it's still open and it's still available. So if you want to go to the Indiana Bar Foundation website, I can actually, if it's possible, if I have the authority to do so, I can drop the link in the chat so you can go and you can see it. That's other high school students who are interested in the practice and who might have exposure to it. That might be a way to do it. But also, if you find out about attorneys in your area, just ask them if you can shadow them for a day, especially during the summer if you may not have anything to do. All of our courts, except for our family courts that deal with juveniles and our juvenile courts, are open. So if you have a court in your town and you just want to go to the city county building or the courthouse in your area, pick a court, call the judge, call the clerk, say, hey, I'm a high school student. I'm interested in the practice of law. Can I sit in? And not only is that a great way to get exposed to what it may be like to practice law, especially if you're a litigator, but that's a great way to build connections with people. Here's a high school student that's calling me in their summer to see what it's like to practice law. And networking is a key piece of any career you want, and that includes law. So what I'll do is I'll drop that link if I can in the chat about the We the People program, and feel free to follow up with any questions with Laura or me if there are other specific things you might be interested in.
Great, thank you. Follow-up question to that one. I'm thinking about pediatric surgery or nuclear chemistry, which are vastly different, but I plan on double majoring. If I want to go into government later, how should I prepare for that? And are there specific areas that my fields may match to?
Dr. Joe, can you repeat that? You said pediatric, what was it? I missed.
Yeah, pediatric surgery or nuclear chemistry.
Nuclear chemistry. So there definitely are opportunities. I think I don't know them as well for those fields, but medicine and science are key. April was saying this earlier. It's a huge part of what the government, the types of research and military, like there's so many different ways that those skill sets can benefit, like there are opportunities and careers in the government. So there certainly are. I mean, I think that's just something where I would encourage that student to, I think it's a great idea to double major and to look for opportunities to learn more about where in either state government or federal government there may be opportunities for people with those skill sets. But there absolutely are. It's just a matter of getting linked up with people who can give you more specific guidance.
Great, thank you. I'm sorry, April, did you have something you wanted to add? Nope. Okay. All right. The next question, I see that you were able to add that link. So you all can grab the link for We the People that April mentioned a moment ago from the chat box. So the next question, are there any prerequisites before applying to law school?
No, I think the only prerequisite you need to have is that you have completed an undergrad degree in most jurisdictions. The only other thing that you might want to think about is, some schools are moving away from having the LSAT as a requirement. So that's another thing to think about as well. But most people, if you are a US citizen, if you're practicing here in the States, you just need an undergrad degree. And the reason why I say that is because when I was in law school, there were a number of people who were entering law school in the United States who had actually practiced law in another country. And so they came to that experience with some of them working in the legal field and having graduated from law schools in their respective countries. But if you are in the United States, you're graduating from a US undergraduate school, the only thing you really need is an undergraduate degree. And you may or may not need an LSAT score depending on the school that you apply to. But other than that, there really aren't any prerequisites. There were people in my law school class who came from hard science backgrounds and went to law school because they knew they wanted to go into patent law. And in order to go into patent law, you usually have to have some type of STEM degree in order to, meet all the requisite coursework to not only pass the bar, but to pass the patent bar, which is another element. So for that person who's thinking about doing nuclear engineering or pediatric surgery, if you want to get a law degree and want to get a patent license, those are just things to consider. But no, there aren't that many prerequisites for law school.
And one thing to think about too is your application, what you'll need to submit along with, proof that you've completed your undergraduate degree or you're slated to, is just thinking about your resume, your personal statement, and letters of recommendation. So one thing for me in my journey was that I graduated undergrad in 3 years and I was in such a hurry to get done that it was harder, I think, for me to have good letters of recommendation because I didn't necessarily have time to take a class with a professor, take another class with the same professor and build those relationships. I had to sort of rush that and, visiting in office hours, getting to know those professors on, by having those one-on-one interactions where talking about the coursework and showing that I had that curiosity and interest in the subject matter. I had to be a little more thoughtful about making those connections in a shorter time frame. So that's something you can think about too, is that in addition to studying for the LSAT, you can potentially take like a prep course and take practice tests and try to get your score as high as it can be, but also thinking about the package materials. You've got your resume, you've got letters of recommendation, but you also will probably have to submit some sort of personal statement or answer questions talking about your interest in law school or writing sample. I can't remember exactly how it's changed over time. But, really being thoughtful about what you're submitting that tells the story about why you want to go to law school and why you want to go to those specific schools that you're interested in.
And to support that.
Oh, April, you went on mute.
Thank you, Laura. To support that, I dropped a link in the chat for the Law School Admissions Council, which is a great resource on how to prepare for law school, how to pay for law school, the things that law schools are looking at. So that may be another source for you to look at and gather information about how you can put your best foot forward if you make the decision to apply for law school, to make sure you're doing the right things in high school and in undergrad to have the strongest application.
Thank you. Laura, I'm not sure, but I think this question might be for you particularly. And whoever submitted this one, if I've got it wrong, let me know. But the question is, I came in late, but heard you talking about interviewing witnesses. Can you talk about that again?
Sure. Yeah, so absolutely. So I work in an interesting area of the law that probably is best described as the umbrella of government investigations. So what that means, both in my private practice experience and now that I work for the federal government, is that I'm investigating whether there have been violations of the federal securities laws. And in the course of doing that, we talk to people. So sometimes that means picking up the phone and calling people. And sometimes that means scheduling a witness interview or scheduling what we call testimony, where we take a more formal interview of someone that is sort of the equivalent of a deposition in civil litigation. And so there's a court reporter, sometimes there's a videographer, and we often spend many hours showing witnesses documents, asking them questions about it. It could be an email or a text message, and just trying to figure out. What I like about the law and about the area of the law that I work in specifically is it's kind of like being a detective. So you're thinking, what happened? Was the law violated? And if so, who was involved? What are the defenses for why they took the actions that they did? So that's where interviewing witnesses is a big part of the work I do and something I really enjoy.
Great, thank you so much. The next question is, can each of you talk a little bit more about what your normal day looks like? Are there normal days?
I can start that. Normal day as a litigator in the Attorney General's office. I work in the Consumer Protection Division. So in my particular area of practice, I look at and investigate complaints where there may be unfair business, trade, or practices that are committed in consumer transactions. That could range from anything from for-profit to not-for-profit entities that claim that they are providing a good or service with a certain quality, warranty, expectation, and eventually, once a consumer makes that transaction, it is uncovered that what was promised to them is not really what they received. So there is the opportunity to investigate, to send out what we call civil investigative demands, which is just a unique name for a subpoena, where we ask information, we interview witnesses, we gather as much data as we can. In the course of my day, what I try to do is first identify what the complaint is, what the allegations are, what happened with this particular Indiana consumer. And sometimes I take that back. There may be consumers outside of the state who have done business with Indiana businesses. And so I have to investigate what happened with this citizen. And then I have to determine whether or not we have what's called jurisdiction. So government agencies have authority. Even if you work in federal government, there is narrow authority. We don't have power to do anything and everything all the time. So even if we have a case where it looks as if there may have been something done wrong in this particular situation, we have to make a legal determination about whether or not this falls within our jurisdiction. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. On those moments we don't have authority, we refer it to another agency who may have authority so that they can investigate it. So once we've gathered data, we investigate the situation, we determine whether or not the allegations have been substantiated. That is, the data that we found, not only is it something that falls within our authority to prosecute, but that it appears that the facts support what the consumer is alleging. And then that's when we make a decision. What do we do with this case? Do we file a complaint in state or federal court, depending on what the allegations are? Do we try and come up with some type of settlement where we can provide some type of return to that consumer for the monies that they have spent or the damage that was done? Another opportunity that we have is that we can coordinate with other states. It is an unfortunate but real aspect of our job is, at least my job, is that we have actors that do bad things across state lines. And so sometimes there are situations where we can coordinate with other states and their attorney general's office to see whether or not we have a case. And depending on the nature of the case, we might be able to bring in a federal agency that has more resources in order to have us pursue that matter. So on any given day, I will be doing some element of that in connection with the cases. And if we have a case that goes to hearing, we file it in a court, then I have status conferences, I have evidentiary conferences, I have settlement conferences, I have discovery, which can be interesting as part of what I do. So all of the things that you may hear about that attorneys do on TV, it's not sometimes that fancy and it's not sometimes that dramatic, but there are elements to it that are very similar. So we go through the whole process of litigation up into including going to a trial. Most of my trials at this point have been in front of a judge, so not in front of a jury because of the nature of the cases that we have. But it does not mean that there may not be a time where someone may ask for a jury trial. So I have to try a case in front of anywhere from 6 to 12 people, maybe 14 if there are two alternates, to get to some type of remedy of the case. So I kind of walked you through what the process is for the cases that I handle in consumer litigation. And so what a day for me would look like would be on my various cases where they are in the process, me doing those actions in a given day.
So April and I have similar jobs. You can tell there's a theme of like, investigating fraud and taking action and trying to resolve that. And so the life cycle of the work I do is very similar to what April does. There's just different terminology for the different stages. But so I'll talk a little bit about life in private practice and then talk about government, just to give that perspective as well. So when I was in private practice, it was my days consisted of, like I said, helping companies and individuals in cases where the government was looking at their conduct. And so that would mean that I was preparing for a witness interview, or a lot of the work related to responding to subpoenas. So the government would send a subpoena to my client at the time, and then we would go through each of the categories and work with the client to pull those records. So it required sometimes learning about like software, like technology, IT systems, working with people in those departments to make sure that we had pulled all the records, because you think about how business is conducted. It's Microsoft Outlook, it's document management systems, it's files that are in storage, some sort of data storage, they're older, it's text messaging, people's personal cell phones, their work issued cell phones. And so just collecting data from all those different places, getting it to the government, making sure it was in the proper format so that they could use, their software to view it, and that each page had a Bates stamp on it so that you could keep track of what had been produced. A Bates stamp is kind of like a social security number for a document. So if you're making a production, you put like a number to keep track of what's being sent. So I would work with documents and work with people. So helping witnesses prepare for an interview or for testimony, walking through the documents they were likely to be asked about. And then sometimes traveling, like I said earlier, traveling abroad to work with witnesses, work with people overseas. So, and there was an advocacy piece to it. I would also, at some point, the fact investigation was done, and there was a point for in private practice in the work that I did where we would have an opportunity to respond and say, here's what you've learned, here's what witnesses said, but here's why we don't think that was a violation of the law. So that was a big part of it too, and just preparing for a dialogue to have about how the case should be resolved, or whether there should be whether a case should be brought in general. So now that I am in the federal government as an attorney, I am doing the flip side of that. So I am looking at data that's been produced and analyzing whether I think it shows a potential violation of the laws, federal laws. And like April said, there are questions about jurisdiction and working with other agencies. So sometimes we're working with a state securities board, or working with the Department of Justice or the FBI, and they have their own investigations that are parallel. So they may be looking at the conduct, but there are times where we are interacting with them as part of our day-to-day work. And so yeah, I have cases that are at different points in the life cycle of their life, so to speak. So, something may be brand new, and using public resources to pull in information before we're even publicly looking into something, and then issuing subpoenas. Also looking, like I said, looking at what is being sent back in response to subpoenas, then analyzing, the laws and the facts, and whether we think we should make a recommendation to the commission. The commission ultimately authorizes litigated action or settled action. And in my work, we have a trial unit that's separate from investigative attorneys, and you have the option of continuing on in to do litigation, or you can step back and play more of a supporting role. So there may be some cases that go to litigation, but I tend to have more interest in doing the fact investigation. So I do a lot of, just preparing to talk to witnesses, looking at documents, thinking about the documents that I want to show witnesses, analyzing, what they've said, and thinking about whether that supports bringing a recommendation for finding that there was a violation of the federal securities laws.
Both have such interesting careers. I want to job shadow you both. For those that are just joining us, if you have a question for our panelists and are here in the Zoom room, you can drop those questions in the chat box to me privately or to everybody in the group. And if you're watching on one of our social media platforms, you can drop those questions in the comments, or you can email them to me directly using the email address next to my name on your screen. All righty. There's a follow-up question that we received as you both were sharing. And that question is, what are the things that you love most about what you do and love the least?
Well, I can go first. One of the things that I love the most about my job is functioning in part as an advisor to people who are probably dealing with something very difficult. There are instances in the practice of law where you can choose a practice where the times that people engage with their lawyers, those are happy days, right? They have an adoption, those are happy days. But it is not uncommon that when you get a notice, especially one that has a big government seal on it, that's not a good day for the person who's receiving it. And sometimes there will be individuals who contact you, because typically in my situation, I'm dealing with businesses at times, but oftentimes I'm dealing with individuals who get that seal and they are in a panic. And so they call trying to figure out, first and foremost, why did I get this letter? What does this mean? Does my business mean it has to shut down immediately, which means I don't have any money coming in? And I am an attorney for the state of Indiana. The state of Indiana is my client. But what I can do without giving legal advice is to at least talk people through what they can expect from the process, what it looks like, what it feels like, what we have the authority to do, what we don't have the authority to do, what their rights are. They can secure counsel, whom they can contact to get attorneys. And so oftentimes in those situations, when someone calls me, especially when we just started an investigation and give them notice, it is not a good day for them. And it does give me a certain amount of satisfaction to at least guide them through an understanding of what they can expect. I can make no guarantees about the outcome of the case and have to remind them that it is probably in their best interest to get their own personal counsel. But those are the things that I enjoy the most. I enjoy having those contacts with general everyday people about it. Um, on the flip side of that, I also enjoy the contacts I have with consumers when they're on the receiving end of bad conduct. So they've exhausted all of the remedies they have on their end. They may have attempted to contact personal counsel, but for whatever reason, they're not able to secure counsel on their own. And the attorney general is their last resort. And so they contact you looking for hope. Is there something that can be done? And sometimes we can, and sometimes we can't. And in those moments when we can, it is extremely rewarding to know that you have been a part of a process, as difficult as it was for the people involved, that gave them some remedy, that gave them some sense that at least someone paid attention and took the time to hear their complaint and walk them through the process and get to some resolution that may not be ideal, but perhaps maybe they can live with. So for me, that's the best part of my job, is to function in that capacity. The worst part of my job is large document reviews. I don't like them. When they come in and it's 10,000 documents and you have to review them and they're spreadsheets, it is, I thank God for my paralegals. I thank the people in my office that are support staff, but document review from a discovery production is tedious. It's very tedious. That's probably the least exciting thing about my job.
So I'll start with the hard parts or the challenges. And again, I'll talk both about private practice and government service, just to talk about more than one thing. I think the challenges of being a lawyer generally are, it's stressful. So the work is, you want to get the best outcome for your client. And sometimes there are challenges where you just can't get the evidence that you wish was out there to be able to, meet whatever standard to bring the case. And so I think that can be a challenge. And in private practice in particular, the hardest parts, I think, for me, were the long hours. It was just very time consuming and difficult, with having a family and having outside interests and just always being on call. I think that's one of the trade-offs you make. So for me in private practice, there were times where, I would get an email on the weekend and suddenly I would need to drop what I was doing and respond to it because it was because of the high stakes nature of the work that was being done. So a client was, as April was describing, it's not a good day. Like when they're getting a letter finding out that they're under investigation, that's very stressful for them. So in private practice, you sort of have to stand in the shoes of your client and also experience that stress, even though you're dealing with the same kinds of cases, day in, day out. So the stress level, the long hours, I think are the challenging parts of being a lawyer in general, but in the area that I've worked in my current role, I've just had such a positive experience that there's not really a lot of downside, thankfully. So I guess I'll just focus on the good things. Like what I love about my job is it's a reading based job. So as I was someone who in high school loved to read, as a child loved to read, and just having the opportunity to read about interesting things. I have a job where I'm expected to know what's going on in terms of other cases that are out there. So having the space and time to read about what's happening in the federal, enforcement of federal securities laws, that really feels meaningful to me to be able to apply that information that I'm getting about what's going on in other cases to the work I'm doing. So I love that it's a reading-based job. I really enjoy the nature of the work in terms of protecting investors and that it feels so meaningful to get up and do this work. And I particularly like that in the agency I work for, I have a lot of flexibility to schedule my day the way I think makes sense. So I'm the one that is typically scheduling meetings and I can base it around what I think timing wise makes sense to do. And I have a lot of support from my supervisors encouraging me to take the steps that I think are necessary. So, you don't always have that in a job. And I feel very grateful that my work gives me a lot of autonomy and just a lot of support, that there are resources that if I need to ask a question for and get some help, if I'm feeling stuck, there are people that can help me. That means a lot.
Great. Thank you both so much. This next question coming in says, I want to be a senator one day, so I'm planning on doing my undergraduate degree in political science and then go to law school. Do you think this is a good plan? Is there something that would be better? And do you have any tips or recommendations?
I think that sounds like an amazing plan. I love that idea. And I think, strive to do those big things. Like we need dedicated public servants who want to pursue those experiences. And I would just say, go for it. I mean, I would love if the student who submitted that wants to talk more about opportunities and, federal service, I'd love to have a longer dialogue about that because I think that's exactly right. So I did a political science degree in undergrad and absolutely loved the classes that I took in that area. And I would encourage that student to think about whether they can come to Washington and work on the Hill, work for the House of Representatives or Senate and get that experience. And that once you're doing an internship in one of those in as opportunities, there are just so many ways you can talk to people who are doing that work and interact with people who have those jobs, and they can give you guidance and share their journeys and how they've gotten there. But I think it sounds amazing and you should go for it.
Great. Thank you so much. April, did you have something you wanted to add? I saw you on mute.
Yes. So if you want to be a federal senator, absolutely, definitely Laura is a great person to contact if you are thinking about pursuing becoming a senator for the state of Indiana. Of course, we have the Indiana General Assembly, and they have programs all of the time happening. I know that it is not an uncommon thing, at least once in the spring and once in the fall. We have K through 12 students all over the government center downtown who are functioning as pages at the General Assembly, who are there to hear hearings, all types of things. So if you know who your local representatives are, I just encourage you to just reach out to them in some way that you can, saying, this is my name. I'm a high school student. I'm interested in pursuing a process in politics, a career in politics. I'm thinking about being a senator. Can I meet you for lunch? Can I have a virtual coffee? Can I come and visit you when you're either back home in your district, or if not, if I can visit you when you're at the General Assembly in Indianapolis? Our next session is starting in January. So feel free to do any of those things and reach out. I'm in the government center. So if you're able to come to the General Assembly and you want to look me up, feel free to let me know. I'd be happy to meet with you and chat with you in person.
And I'll just add, April gave me an idea of something else to share. I had that experience too, where I was interested in politics when living in Indiana. And one of the things I did, I forget which summer it was. I think it maybe was between like around the time I was either in high school or about to start college. But I worked for a gubernatorial campaign and in downtown Indianapolis. I was living in Bloomington because I was going at IU, going to IU. And so I was able to volunteer. And the nice thing, it's all hands on deck. Like all these campaigns need as much help as they can get. So you can be a high school student, and if you send an email or make a call and say I'd like to help, it's they'll say come join us. That sometimes can mean calling people to remind them to vote. It can mean like stuffing, coordinating some sort of mailing or attending a local event like at a county fair. Like there are so many ways to start learning about how the political process works, even in high school.
Thank you both so much. I also know that we do have an alum that is a representative in Indiana right now that has been absolutely wonderful in answering questions for any of our students. So I would be more than happy to put you in to contact with him as well. So just let me know if you're interested in that. So let me go ahead and ask this next question. Can you talk about the law school that you attended and why you chose to go there and what stands out to you most?
I can go first. I chose to attend George Washington Law School in DC, and it's hard. It's been a while since I graduated, so it's kind of hard to remember all the details. But I knew I wanted to be in a larger city. For me personally, because I had an interest, I hadn't specifically identified my particular areas of interest in terms of like a future practice area for when I started my legal career, but I knew I was interested in government, and I wanted to be, I was looking at bigger cities. I wanted to be in maybe New York or Chicago or DC. So I had actually gone on a trip to DC through my experience at the Indiana Academy. There was a program, I think it was called Every 4 Years. And it was something that the Academy did with a museum called Newseum. And we went to DC in 2000, and we got to spend the night, and we got to just see what it was like in DC. And for me, having grown up in Indiana and not traveled a lot, I was just really grateful for that experience, and it kind of opened my eyes to what it would be like to live in DC. So when I was researching law schools, I definitely was interested in being in DC. So I applied to, I don't even know, probably 10 law schools, and George Washington was one that gave me acceptance. And so was very excited to be able to go to school in a city where I thought I might want to start my legal career.
I graduated from the IU McKinney School of Law, which is in Indianapolis. It was the only school that I'm remembering that I applied to because it was the school that I wanted to go to. I live in Indianapolis. My family is here. It was the best choice for me, especially since, as I mentioned, I did not go immediately from undergrad to law school. So I was out working, I had a mortgage, I had other responsibilities. I wanted to pursue a program that would allow me to continue to work while I got a law degree. And so the McKinney program in Indianapolis allows me to do that. One of the things that I also like about the McKinney Law School is that it is in the heart of the city. You are literally steps away from large government entities, whether it's state or federal, large corporate entities, educational institutions. And so oftentimes it's not uncommon for us to be able to participate in, and I was able to participate in externship programs where I was able to complete a clerkship with the federal courts. I was able to complete a clerkship with the state courts and then work for the Attorney General's office, where I eventually was hired on once I passed the bar, and have those connections and be in the city where so much is happening at the same time. Those experiential programs were critical. And I think oftentimes people are looking at students who take advantage of engaging in the practice of law outside of the classroom. So regardless of where you choose to go to school, I would encourage you to seek out those opportunities where you can see more about the reality of the practice of law, whether that's working at a law firm, working for a court, whether state, federal, or appellate, whatever you can do so that you can have a well-rounded picture of what the law, the practice of law looks like in real life. But those are the reasons why I chose McKinney. And I am an active alumni, just helped them during the moot court brief judging. I'm still very active in the city and know a lot of people who are active in the city. So it's not only been a great experience for me as a law student, but now that I'm a practicing attorney, a lot of the people that I went to school with, I still maintain connections with, and it's continued to be a great professional network for me.
Great, thank you so much. Let's see, this next question are, what steps or recommendations would you offer to help me familiarize myself with the different types of law? Because I'm trying to decide on a specialty. Good question.
It's a very good question. And I think when I was trying to learn about areas of the law, I didn't have really any lawyers in my family. I think I have a second cousin who's a lawyer, but didn't live in Indiana. And he didn't live in Indiana. And so I didn't know what lawyers did. I remember having that struggle of just like, how can I, to the extent that law firms are wanting me to identify what areas I'm interested in, how do I even begin? I don't know. So it is a challenge. And I think one thing I did was I purchased books by like the Law School Admissions Council. I think there's a book of just like careers in law, and it's like 2 pages, per topic, just getting those intros. And so for what I would encourage a student to do is find some sort of resource that gives like a broad, overall knowledge, so you can get some knowledge about what these areas of law things happen and what they do and what day-to-day life looks like for those kinds of lawyers. And just think about what you want to do in terms of what I would encourage people, I didn't think about this enough, I think for myself, is that, what do you want your day-to-day look like in terms of, do you want to be in court? Is that exciting? Do you want to have a job where you travel? I've talked to a lot of law students where, they say they're interested in international law because they think that will mean that they're traveling a lot, but that isn't always the case. Sometimes that ends up, not requiring a lot of travel. So think about, do you want a job where you're going to telework, post COVID? Is it nice, do you want to be in your house, or do you want to be in a company? Do you want to be in house in a business where you're helping, where you're providing legal advice, but also giving business advice? Sometimes there's a sort of a merger of what you're doing. So that's what I would encourage law students to think about is, find out what lawyers in different areas do, and then do your homework. So talk to people in that area and do some research, learn about what their day-to-day life is. What are the challenges? What are the joys of the work they do? And then you can go from there.
I would agree with that. I think one of the things that helped me in having a work experience prior to going to law school is that it helped me figure out what I did not want to do. And sometimes that can be as instructive as figuring out what you do want to do. If you never want to have to visit a client in incarceration, that may decide what kind of career path you may choose as a lawyer. There are some lawyers who never want to be in a courtroom and never have to be. There are some lawyers who love working with documents. So if you love working with documents and contracts, that's what you should choose. Oftentimes that initial assessment of trying to figure out what you want to do is to be very clear on what you don't want to do. And then you can start figuring out those things that make a day for you. As Laura said, do you want to be in a courtroom? Do you want to be traveling? Do you want to be doing these things? And then take it upon yourself to kind of seek out individuals who do that. You might be surprised on how willing a person will be who might be a stranger to getting a email, especially if you're already on LinkedIn. If you don't have a LinkedIn, I recommend you getting a LinkedIn profile, even though you're in high school. It's a very productive and impactful way to grow connections and to create a personal brand for you as a professional that maybe some other social media sites may not be able to do for you. So if you haven't developed a LinkedIn, I would encourage you to do it. And then utilize that to do searches on attorneys in a particular area and reach out to them and kind of give them an opportunity to say, this is what my day is like. I can meet you for coffee. You can come and shadow me. I have had people come and shadow me to see what my day looks like, and they find out maybe it's not as exciting as they thought it would be as a lawyer, but it's the reality of the practice. So anything you can do to find a career that meets what you like and what you enjoy, that helps you minimize what you don't like and don't enjoy, I think is probably the best path for you to do. So gather that information, make those connections, and do those personal assessments.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen with you now. I'm going to put a QR code up on the screen. So for all of those watching this, if you're not a current Academy student, sorry guys, this one doesn't apply to you. Scan this code and I will send you some awesome Academy swag. Let me get that up there on the screen for you. There you go. So if you scan that QR code, I will send you some awesome Academy swag. So while I'm going to leave that up there on the screen for just another moment or two and go ahead and present the next question to April and Laura. So the next question is, what books or resources would you recommend that I check out? Got you with a tough question there, didn't we?
Yeah, I mean, I was starting to Google. I think it's been so long since I've been in high school or college students' shoes that I haven't been thinking about those kinds of resources. So I was just sort of refreshing my memory. Like I think I mentioned earlier, there's a website called the Law School Admissions Council. And I think that website has some prep materials like LSAT prep, but also just like general resources about careers in the law. But like so much is publicly available now. I mean, you can find things via Google. And like I said earlier in this program, the USA Jobs webpage, I think it's helpful if you're thinking about a potential career or potential job you'd like to have in the future, to think about, well, what do I need? Like, if once I'm to the point where I can apply for it, what will they be wanting to see from me? So you can use USA Jobs to just sort of do research about what opportunities are out there in the law and in federal government service.
Laura, I dropped that link to the Law School's Admissions Council in the chat for everyone.
Awesome.
What kind of shocked me about the question was, it depends on what the topic is. If you're talking about profession, like the legal profession, as opposed to what I would like to read, because I pulled up my Audible and I'm like, I don't think that's what they want to know. But if you're looking at things about the legal profession, I think for me, histories are great. I like reading books like The Color of Law. I think that's important. I think the 13th Amendment is a great book. I think if you want to read about jurists in general, right? If you want to look up the history of the Supreme Court, if you want to look up any of those are probably good books to read about getting kind of a broad swath of what it is to be an attorney, to practice law, and how it's evolved over time, at least in this country. If you're into podcasts and you're interested in SCOTUS, I think Strict Scrutiny is a great one to listen to, because Strict Scrutiny is a great one because all of the people who are on the Strict Scrutiny podcast have experience as being clerks or working for the Supreme Court. If you're looking at things about that might have a legal tinge to it, but may not be more legal, believe it or not, American Scandal is a great podcast because it will talk about everything from the Tuskegee experiment to Watergate, to all types of things that happened in major history, the Iran-Contra affair, and will give you a well-rounded aspect to it, but will also feed in the legal aspect to it. One of the things that I kind of want to say before we close out is that it is important to be a well-rounded person, because I think well-rounded people make great lawyers. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes you're meeting people on the worst day of their life. Having the emotional intelligence and flexibility to be able to deal with people who are upset, but not necessarily upset with you, I think is a great skill to learn, and not everybody has that. The ability to see and hear things from a perspective that is unlike your own is clear. There are going to be people who you may encounter in your work life who you might have a hard time connecting with them because their life experience is 180 degrees different from your life experience. Law permeates everything. People are coming from different perspectives. Anything that you can do to make you a better rounded person, volunteer your time, participate in a not-for-profit. If you're not the type of person who's very socially active, find ways where there might be things that you like, going to the movies, playing games that get you involved with other people. Because yes, there are some really big books that you have to read in law school, but law is about relationships. Law is about people. And so anything that can help you be able to build relationships and better understand people, I think is a good path to be on if you want to be a lawyer.
I agree. And I think one thing, when I look back on my high school experience, I did a lot of theater, and I think that was really relevant to the practice of law. I mean, so much of what we do when we interview witnesses and when talking with people, it's, you know, that performative and like public speaking, having that skill set is really valuable. And when I'm drafting up an interview outline, it's sort of like writing a one-person play with like impromptu, you know, I don't know what the response necessarily is going to be from the witness, but then I have to pivot. So having those experiences doing improv and, you know, working like what April said, being able to interact with people and, you know, just communicate with people when they're going through a stressful situation is so valuable in the work as a lawyer.
Great advice. Thank you both so much for that. And April, you mentioned Audible, so now I have to toss this question out as our final question today. Best book recommendations from each of you. Not necessarily law oriented, but can be, but best book recommendation. Ooh, I know. Gotta think about that one.
I have to look back on my collages. Every year I make a collage of all the books I've read in the past year. So one that stands out to me, I may come back with another one, but just one to start. I really loved the nonfiction book, Why We Sleep. It's talking about the importance of sleep, the science behind sleep. You know, I felt like as a parent, I learned a lot. As, you know, someone who's, you know, over life, like the importance of sleep. I really love that book, Why We Sleep. There's another one called 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals. And that's really valuable too. I would love, like, I wish high school me had that book, because you're just thinking about how to be thoughtful about your life. You only have 4,000 weeks on average. So it was just, it's not a long book, and it's just really such a great book to think about how you want to spend that time.
Thank you for that, Laura. I'm in my Audible now trying to add those.
They're great.
I remember and I say this because I remember vividly when I was in school, for some reason, I don't know if it's because we were Gen Xers, we always used to say things like sleep was for the weak, sleep was for the weak. And now I'm at the age where I'm like, sleep is for the living. Like, if you want to have a happy life and want to continue to have one, you need to rest. But yes, I think those are two great recommendations. I have nothing to add.
Okay, I have one more to add. Sorry, the most recent one I've read recently, The Anxious Generation. Dr. Joe, have you read that yet?
I have not.
So good. Talking about just, you know, the impact of screens and social media. And it really inspired me to think about, you know, limiting the amount of time I spend on social media, because it's got a lot of data and charts, science behind it. It's a really good book too. The Anxious Generation. I recommend that one.
I've added that to my list. Thank you. I am going to quickly share my screen one more time with everybody. All right, whoops, let's cancel that. All righty, I think you should be able to see on this screen there some of our upcoming programs. And there's a QR code there, so if you want to scan that, it will give you a list of all of our upcoming programs for the entire year. We have both virtual as well as in-person programs, and I just want to point out a couple of them to you. We do have the virtual ambassador chat coming up on Tuesday, November the 5th, and that's where you can talk to our current students and ask any questions that you have of them about the Academy, about the application process, and what life here at the Academy is like. We also have the virtual lunch Launch and Learn for our parents. So for all the parents watching this today, please join me for that one. I'll be talking about a profile of an Academy student. I offer these about once a month, and each month we have a different topic. And then, of course, on the 9th, we have our next Discovery Day program where you'll have the opportunity to tour the facilities and talk with students and faculty, administrators, and really kind of get to know what the Academy program is and discover how this is a great fit for your student. So again, those are just a couple of the upcoming programs that we have that I wanted to point out, but please do scan the QR code and take a look at all of our upcoming programs. A huge thank you to each of you for attending today, and to April and Laura with all of the great information that they've shared and all of those resources that they've provided. I thank you both very much. It was awesome seeing you and catching up with you. So I thank you all again for attending today. Until next time, enjoy your day.